Tweeting, your two options. You can either quote the guest, and if you quote them accurately, I'll retweet it automatically. That's absolutely fine. But otherwise, you also have the option of quoting some of the comment. Well, in fact, commenting on the actual content that's being discussed at that moment in time. So Clover, for example, number one in terms of corporate reputation, as per Reputation House or the Reputation Institute's Index. I wonder did that surprise you? It certainly surprised me, by the way. Let's talk about creativity on the African continent. Neo Mashigo is with me, the chairman of the Loeries, as well as executive creative director of I See a Different You, the agency. Neo, good chatting to you. Hi.
Hi, Ashraf. Good morning. How's it?
I'm very well indeed. Right, so tell listeners, of course, we always have a thought leader discussion at 9 o'clock, and that's what we're doing now. So we're going to pick your brain on creativity. First of all, what are you suggesting in terms of the move for understanding creativity, or a different sort of creativity on the African continent?
I think it's about us as Africans starting to tell more and more of our own stories, and like creating a narrative that we determine and not following the story that we've been given by Europe, for instance. So it's about us finding and digging deep within ourselves and finding that space that is ours. And I think an example is like, Kwaito musicians did that without any commission. They decided that this is the type of music they're going to make, and this is what they like, and they went out there and creatively put it out there, and the consumers loved it. And no matter what people say about Kwaito, Kwaito still sells. Yeah.
Okay, that's
so
an important
it's the same
point,
narrative in communication, the same space in design, architecture. That's where we need to be looking and finding our own narrative.
What I find interesting, just in terms of your own thoughts before we went on air, and you gave examples of Snow White Snow White in particular, I think, as a classic example of us just consuming things without actually thinking about where we are as a country and as a continent, right? So maybe a comment on that, and perhaps at the same time, let's talk about how your organization, in this case, the Loeries, right? How the Loeries has in fact changed from its narrative, from its judging, and from its input and output over the last 5 years, or maybe even more than that.
Yeah, I think over the last 5 years, as the Loeries, we became more, we recognized more that we are in Africa, and this show needs to have a representation of the people. It needs to feel like an award show out of Africa, not an award show out of Europe. And the work as well, like South Africans, we've always as an industry like searched for that South African voice in the work that we do. And the clients started demanding that as well. And so as a Loeries, we also, in like judging, we look at work in the sense that does this feel like it's an ad for South Africa? And we also introduce categories like New Voice, where we recognize work that is done in the vernacular languages, because before, like 5 years ago, there was no category where a BD radio script can be judged. And now we've even gone further to introducing categories that is open to any medium that's in any language that is spoken in South Africa. So, and also opening up the award show to other countries and encouraging other countries to enter and showcase what creativity looks like for them in their spaces, and also engage and share our lessons as the Loeries with the different countries, encouraging them to set up their own award shows, and obviously us as the Loeries being the creative festival of Africa and Middle East.
0891104207, chatting to Neo Mashigo, who's the chairman of the Loeries, but also executive creative director of I See a Different You. Loeries is important because the next edition of the Loeries happens in Durban, I think sort of mid-August. We'll get you some exact dates just now, but that's when it is. Let's then talk about, this point about creativity. So you are saying we need to be more authentic as South Africans and as Africans in terms of the type of creative content that we produce as opposed to importing it. I mean, that's a given, right? How far down the line are we? How is it playing out in the creative space through agencies and through brands?
I think we still we are still at that space where we are afraid. I think most people, everybody recognizes the need and people want to do it. But whether we can and we have what it takes, anything new needs people to drive it, and it needs you to take risks. And those are the things that we're still struggling with within the agency and the marketers. So the stumbling blocks happen sometimes internally at an agency where, you know what works and what has worked before. And once a young creative comes and puts something that is completely new, and you are like 45 years old and you know nothing about what they're putting down, it's a scary situation. And maneuvering around that space where you're going to go and like a lot of instinct is needed to recognize new, fresh work. And so I think we're still in the fear stages, and also once we get something wrong, the punishment is so severe that it doesn't allow people to try out new things. So I think we need to still work harder at taking the risks and chances, and especially when it comes to the African narrative. People are willing to take risks when it comes to like stuff that's based on like European ideas, because like people, I don't know, somehow people are comfortable with that. But when it comes to our own African work, it's very tough. Like even the work that I've worked on or other people have worked on, and you ask them, how did you get this thing right? The journey was always tough. The story was always tough,
How are you therefore getting resistance from brands or agencies with regards to a greater call for let's call it uniquely African creativity?
I think it's on both sides. The resistance is on both sides, but if you're talking in the boardroom, the eagerness is there. But once you are talking like now, here's the thing that you have to put out to the market, that's when the fear kicks in. And I think we need to find a way. And the more people are successful at putting out good work that is more authentic, the better it's going to get for everyone, between agency and client.
So let's take your position as the newly appointed chairperson of the Loeries. I mean, is this like a project that you then taken upon it yourself to say, in my position at the helm of the Loeries, this is let's call it a communication transformation that I will drive?
Yeah, I think for me personally, that's something I've always driven from the time I started in advertising. I've always tried to tell authentic stories, and especially South African stories. That was where my passion lied. And I realized earlier on when I started that the work that I'm more passionate about, nobody cares about in the industry, in the department, So I had to find a way of like still keeping on loving these projects. I think that also rings true for many black creatives, where the things that that you feel very strongly about, there wasn't like a lot of people who can back you up on the work. So I think throughout my career I've been like just pushing that fight and trying to put that kind of work out. And getting to the Loeries, fortunately, within the board of the Loeries, you've got like a team of people that are also in the same space and the same frame of mind, and wanting this voice and this look, and want to be the first people to crack it and put it out there. If you look throughout the continent, you see. So I've been driving that mission, and I think that mission is going to be a mission that continues because most people, we know how Europe looks like. And we know that if we are going to make it as an industry, and if we're going to have an impact on the brands and our clients' brands, we have to get that right.
What about the fact that we do live in a global village, right? And therefore the interactions are so great that we almost need to drop boundaries. For example, a very topical person is Muhammad Ali, who I certainly viewed as a young kid growing up as the greatest sports personality ever, and I have no doubt that in the 70s and 80s he was the most recognized human being on planet Earth. Now, if we go into geographical boundaries, then that would not apply. What about the flip side? That this thing about having a uniquely European or uniquely African narrative is just outdated and ridiculous in a world where communication has allowed quicker, easier communication, contact with people all around the world.
I think it's actually that is the mistake that people make. I think our contribution with our own narrative adds to that pool of the global village. And I think it's more the global village waiting for our voice and contribution into this space where when we go in, we know Chinese films, how they've impacted us. And they are waiting for our films to impact the world. And that space, once mixing, the only way we can mix is if we have a voice. But if we don't have a voice, we can't begin to start adding the tone. Muhammad Ali broke a lot of rules, and that's what made him Muhammad Ali. He brought something to the table into the boxing world, moved it from boxing to politics, but he brought something with him. So we haven't put out our own voice to the table, so we're part of the global village, but we're not adding, we're just taking.
Okay,
and that new voice is the addition that everybody's waiting for.
Right, chatting to Neo Mashigo, the chairman of the Loeries, as part of our thought leader discussion we have first up on, at 9 o'clock on a Sunday on the media show. If you tuned in late, the media show started today 1 hour early. Yes, the editors is not there. I can't tell you why, and I will just emphasize that point, but you can certainly drop management an email if, as many people, you have some concerns about the why. The decision making is not part of me, so I do not know. Many people are speculating, and that's simply what it is. But I think drop an email to management at SAFM. You can actually get all the details on the website as well. In terms of where we are now, let's then talk about, in the South African space, some examples of brands and of agencies and maybe creative work that has pleased you because it reflects exactly the type of emphasis on creativity on the African continent that you want.
I think I don't know. I'll start with an old ad. I think you remember the World Cup ad for SAFM. It was a football ad using soccer. It was hawkers against shop owners.
Yeah.
On the field, and they were competing. So that story for me, how they brought all South Africans on one field, challenging each other with football, and how the story was told. It was a fresh new way of talking about football, but also introducing the different colors and textures that we find in the South African space, and how the music was used. So people identified with that. Like everything, a lot of things about that ad was very new and very fresh, and people identified with it. So for me, that's like kind of one example, which is in a very difficult space where it's football and everybody knows how football ads are made. So that's one of the examples. And another one, I would use SABC 1, look at another side of Mzansi where roles were switched between black and white. That one for me it spoke about our truth as South Africans and communicated what SABC 1 is about, but without shying away from the fact, like the brand told the consumer the truth about the situation, but also gave them the opportunity of seeing what SABC One is about. I think the line was take another look at Mzansi. And then most recently, we did an ad for DSTV Africa, TIA, this is Africa. It was just like taking every negative thing that has been said about Africa and spinning it into a positive, but showcasing what Africa has to offer throughout. You know, we just shot in different countries, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. So those ones are like some of the big stories. And like obviously there's like very small ads that do the same thing. You know, but I think in advertising we still quite behind. There's like other industries are leading where.
Why is that? I mean, advertising by its very nature is incredibly innovative. It demands that, and yet you're suggesting that it's the advertising industry that is actually slower in embracing other concepts compared to other industries. Why do you think that's the case?
I think everyone is harder on advertising. You know, like the consequences are greater. You know, there's money that will be lost if you get it wrong. There's like, you know, so like the risk is much higher than other industries. If I release a Goitos track, it doesn't work today, that's fine. You know, you don't play on radio, and I'll try again another song. But if I mess up a Coca-Cola ad, there's consequences for Coca-Cola and for the agency. So I think that thing makes us like tread very lightly. And I think in our culture, we're not taught to try and make mistakes, you know. So, and research as well, I find research is quite stale in terms of how it's conducted. It's like, it's used to find the same answers to the same questions. It's not there to allow space for new things. You know, I found that how research is conducted, obviously, you're not going to be able to put out new, fresh work in research. If you take it to if it's fresh and it scares you and you put it out to research, you're most likely going to get the results that say don't do it.
All right, maybe just
yeah.
One last thought then from your side regarding not South Africa, other African countries. Who's doing what that impresses you?
I think Nigerians. I think Nigerians are ahead of us. You know, like they are doing a lot of stuff. Like you look at like film industry. They were unapologetic. They didn't make any excuses about money and stuff. They wanted to tell a story. They got a camera. They shot it. You see the microphone. It doesn't matter. The story was told. You know, and that's the quickest way of improving, you know, and I think so they did that with their movies, they did that with their music, and even in advertising. I like the style of art direction that's coming out of Nigeria, you know, like it feels Nigerian, you know, it has a boldness about it, even where as a South African, when you look at it, you can sense that it's not just like another black guy. This is like, it's a Nigerian story, and energy about it that feels Nigerian.
Okay.
And so I think because they crack it in the other industries, so it becomes easier for them to move into the advertising space. But the challenge lies in the fact that the brands are run from a global space where they use methods that you dump strategy, advertising, everything onto the continent. So we're still going to struggle with that global space of going. The global brand will drop into their agency network, and the work will come out the same.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Neo, thanks so much for your time. I know the Loeries is the 15th to the 21st of August in Durban, and we'll probably chat more about that closer to the time. Neo Mashigo, the chairman of the Loeries, as well as the executive creative director of ICA Different You. That's a creative name, don't you think? Talking about creativity on the African continent. Right, William Bird comes up next, talking about a very important issue about how we report when we report on children, about children. Who reports? What am I saying? What can be said? What can't be said? What are the rules around it? Do you, in fact, know? And by the way, just your thoughts on a brand win or a brand fail for this week. You can certainly SMS me, 34701, or you can tweet using hashtag Media Show. You must do that and quote your brand win or brand fail of the week. And what about an ad win or an ad hit or an ad lose of the week as well? I'd love to know about that too. You can certainly do that too. Right, William Bird, right after this.
In focus this Sunday, the devastating drought still persists in large parts of the country. Farmers in Namaqualand recently received further donations and say they are very grateful. But they will need further assistance if it doesn't rain. And the escape artist Sylvester the Lion has a new home. Focus, incisive and insightful. The Sunday evening at 6:30, only on SABC2.
Did you know that the Constitution of South Africa protects the rights of women and young girls against abuse and discrimination? Make use of the Constitution and be the youth you want to be as we commemorate Youth Month. Report gender abuse and discrimination by calling the Gender Commission on 0800 007 709 or learn more about gender rights by visiting www.cge.org.za.
This initiative is supported by SABC Foundation.
Media at SAFM with Ashraf Garda, exploring every media platform and industry, only on 104 to 107.
Right, we can get to William Bird in just a moment or two. By the way, Muhammad Ali, I mean, let's just touch on him for a second. Phenomenal brand. I made the point that he's, for me, one of the few people, eminently successful, as a boxer. Number one, we know that. Two, as a master communicator, because he certainly was. And three, obviously, as a human rights activist as well. And I don't know how many people are there who's been able to straddle three disciplines and be so successful at all three, which is clearly what he was. Now, just for the moment,